The focus is very much on NATO and politics unfolding, particularly in the UK.
Well, let's begin with the NATO declaration, because a friend of mine wrote to me yesterday and said this is probably the most confrontational, warmongering document that he's ever seen. And I think that is pretty much it. So the summit declaration has been made, and I think it deserves us going through this in a little bit of detail because it is horrendous. So bearing in mind that this is, a diplomatic document, and diplomatic language tends to be relatively gentle and soft and measured. This is quite incredible. So we, the heads of state and government of the North Atlantic Alliance, have gathered in Washington to celebrate the 75th anniversary of our alliance, forged to preserve peace. So we've got to remember this is a defensive alliance. So as you listen to the words here, you consider the defensiveness of it. Forged to preserve peace, NATO remains the strongest alliance in history. We stand in unity and solidarity in face of a brutal war of aggression on the European continent at a critical time for our security. We warmly welcome our 32nd and newest ally, Sweden. The historic accession of Finland and Sweden makes them safer and our alliance stronger, including in the High North and the Baltic Sea. Every nation has the right to choose its own security arrangements. We reaffirm our commitment to NATO's open door policy in line with Article 10 of the Washington Treaty. So, Brian, right there, despite all the claims that Putin is expansionist and Xi Jinping is expansionist, they're openly declaring their continuing commitment to expansionism.
And the expansion to the east is what's causing the problem.
Exactly. So let's go on then. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has shattered peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area and gravely undermined global security. Russia remains the most significant and direct threat to ally security. Terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is the most direct asymmetric threat to the security of our citizens and to international peace and prosperity. The threats we face are global and interconnected. So in that paragraph, they are suggesting that Russia is behind global terrorism, when in fact, I would suggest, and I think there's a ton of evidence that we've covered over the last 15 years, Brian, that Britain, the United States, the EU tend to be funding and behind global terrorism.
I think the evidence has become overwhelming, Mike, that when you go into these things that the West, UK, the US in particular, are at the bottom of a lot of troubles in the world, and the lid needs to be taken off this, otherwise it will not stop.
Indeed. So we continue. Strategic competition, pervasive instability and recurrent shocks define our broader security environment. Conflict, fragility and instability in Africa and the Middle East directly affect our security and the security of our partners. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but the Tony Blair Institute is very active in Africa and the Middle East, right?
Yes.
Yeah, anyway, okay.
And have we got more trouble in Africa? Yes, we have. Is the EU active in Africa? Yes, more trouble.
Yes. Where present, these trends, among others, contribute to forced displacement, fueling human trafficking and irregular migration. So we're just going to ignore the fact that we're driving this human trafficking and irregular migration and blame it all on the Russians, because that's the best thing to do. Iran's destabilizing actions are affecting Euro-Atlantic security. The People's Republic of China's stated ambitions and coercive policies continue to challenge our interests, security and values. The deepening strategic partnership between Russia and the People's Republic of China and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut and reshape the rules-based international order are a cause for profound concern. So it's now clear Russia, Iran, PRC are the main targets of this defensive alliance. So we don't want to, have a conversation with these people because that might bring peace about. So we've just got to continue to bang the war drums.
And of course, they are mocking the rules-based international order where nobody is ever allowed to know what the exact rules are, the purpose of those rules.
They go on. State and non-state actors are using increasingly aggressive hybrid actions against allies. We will continue to prepare for, deter, defend against and counter hybrid threats and challenges. We reiterate that hybrid operations against allies could reach the level of an armed attack and could lead the North Atlantic Council to invoke Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. So later on in the programme, we're going to be looking once again at cyber and who is actually behind most of the cyber warfare that's going on in the world at the moment. Well, this could lead apparently to an invocation of Article 5, only if we attack ourselves. But anyway, it goes on. We condemn Russia's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric and coercive nuclear signaling, including its announced stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus, which demonstrate a posture of strategic intimidation. Let's just remind ourselves that it is the United States that has effectively withdrawn from the intermediate nuclear weapons agreements. And it's the United States that's talking about putting nuclear weapons back into Germany and other countries at the moment. So if Russia is talking about putting nuclear weapons into Belarus, that is in reaction. This is in reaction to what the US and NATO is doing once again. But don't worry, we're going to tell the entire world, and the narrative is that it's all Russia that's doing it. Russia has increased its reliance on nuclear weapon systems and continued to diversify its nuclear forces, including by developing novel nuclear systems and deploying short and intermediate range dual-capable strike capabilities, all of which pose a growing threat to the alliance. We are determined to constrain and contest Russia's aggressive actions and to counter its ability to conduct destabilizing activities towards NATO and allies. For our next summit, we will develop recommendations on NATO's strategic approach to Russia, taking into account the changing security environment. And they talk about the European Union being an essential partner. So this is all about EU defence union is now back on the agenda, firmly back on the agenda. And here we will meet the leadership of Australia, Japan, New Zealand and the Republic of Korea, because we've got to expand not only eastwards in Europe, but also in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific is important for NATO, given that developments in that region directly affect Euro-Atlantic security. And with respect to Ukraine themselves, they have agreed to set up the NATO Security Alliance and training for Ukraine. The pledge of long-term security assistance for Ukraine, and finally, establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis Training and Education Centre. So I don't know what you make of that, Brian, but the rhetoric is extremely strong and extremely warlike and not defensive in any way, shape or form.
Well, the word rhetoric covers it all, because it is rhetoric, and we can see that we've got people who are not interested in peace. If they were interested in peace, they'd be talking about peace and they'd be talking about pathways to peace. But they're obsessed with Ukraine, because Ukraine must be held at all cost. It must be asset stripped. It must be converted to European-style democracy, whatever that means. And what better place to go than a little bit of a video clip here with Defence Secretary John Healey talking about Ukraine.
General Hodges just said, look, we need to view Ukraine in our own strategic interest. He's a general, he's got that strategic insight. I'm a politician, I'd put it plainly, because I don't think our public and our people fully and properly understand what's at stake here. And so some of the arguments I try to make in the UK are, especially on the campaign trail, which we've just finished, defence of the UK starts with Ukraine. And that's true for us, it's true for most of the European nations, it's relevant also to America's interests as well. And that's the case because we know that if Putin prevails in Ukraine, he's not going to stop there.
How do they know that?
Well, of course they don't. World War III starts with Ukraine. It's nothing to do with the defence of UK. It's to do with starting a world war. But you notice the sneer, our people, the public, they just don't understand. We're all just little people. We can't possibly understand that the UK has helped whip up a horrific war in Ukraine. Dead on the Ukrainian side, the figure 500,000 being repeated now by many analysts, and I could believe this is true. And of course, Zelensky working hard to try and recruit now his third army. Why does he need another 200,000 men? Because of course the others are dead on the battlefield as a result of Conservatives and now the New Labour rhetoric. So Biden, of course, is the main powerhouse behind NATO. It is the Americans. So let's have a look at Biden in action.
I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Thank you so much.
So the man, we are told, has his finger on the nuclear button, who can't think, who can't string words together, who can't function as the President of the United States, and we are to believe that he is the one manipulating politics. That was just one clip. There are many of him fumbling and stumbling through his words or falling up or down the steps of aircraft. But we shouldn't worry, because apparently we just don't understand, and there's nothing wrong with Biden. Who should we believe? Let's look at this clip.
The special relationship is so important. It's forged in difficult circumstances, endured for so long, and stronger now than ever. So we're very pleased to be able to come so early in the government to recommit to NATO, to recommit to the special relationship, and to have the opportunity to discuss these affairs with you is really important for us.
Figurative sense,
5 days in.
I kind of see you guys as the knot tying the transatlantic alliance together. The closer you are with Europe, the more you're engaged, the more, because we know where you are, and we know where we are in both countries.
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Well, there we are. There's President Biden talking about bits of string, presumably rotten string and granny knots. But at one stage, Starmer was pressed over the mental state of Biden. And let's hear what he says.
Prime Minister, you know what an increasing number of people are saying? They're implying that President Biden is senile. Is he?
No, we had a really good bilateral yesterday. We were billed for 45 minutes. We went on for the best part of an hour. We went through a huge number of issues at pace. He was actually on really good form and
mentally agile.
Absolutely across all the detail. We were going at pace through a number of issues, which was really important to me because obviously it was my first opportunity to have a bilateral like that. And he's shown incredible leadership. If there's one thing that came out of the council session yesterday, it was a clear understanding by everybody here that we face probably more threats now than we've faced for many years, and that we need the resolve of NATO as the alliance that's been there for a very long time, that defensive alliance. And President Biden has led through that some of the most challenging issues actually that we are facing globally.
We've seen George Clooney suggesting he's not up to it. Is that unfair?
Well, I've given you my readout of the meeting. We had, as I say, we covered a lot of ground, strategic ground, international stuff, and not just Ukraine. He was on good form, and of course, you know, various interventions yesterday. We went straight from that to the dinner that he hosted. So.
He was in good form not something to say when you've been to visit your aging grandparents in the care home?
Yeah, and you're trying to keep morale up in the family.
Yes.
So my opinion is that Starmer's happy to look at the camera and just lie about the true condition of the US president. That's my personal opinion. People might disagree, but something's very wrong. But let's look at something else that's happening in the background, which I find very disturbing. It's the power of celebrity.
Let me ask you something that's on a lot of people's minds. What are your thoughts about President Biden? Should he drop out of the race?
Could he? Yes, he could.
Should he?
Should he? It's a painful decision because I admire the man tremendously. I personally had a fundraiser for him at Mar House in April, and I think he's done an incredible job. But I am worried, not this week or next week, but let's say next year. And it's just so hard for me to imagine a man 4.5 years down the line from now, particularly at a time that's so combative, that requires somebody to really be so articulate. I think the most disappointing thing for me in the debate is not necessarily how he felt, but the inability to acknowledge all the lies that ex-President Trump was talking about.
Do you think, though, that figures in the entertainment industry like yourself can bring about real tangible action in terms of President Biden making a decision, as opposed to statements from politicians in Washington?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, we've been accused of having a little bigger voice than we should have, but we're all involved in, as celebrities.
So Mr. Douglas there espousing the power of celebrities, and of course this in itself, whatever we think of Biden, is immensely dangerous, that the celebrity world should be able to drive politics and keep a president, for example, in place who clearly wants war and more war. But it's not only celebrities with the power. Let's have a look at this headline from The Independent. And this is back in October 2023. Starmer wins backing of billionaire BlackRock chief. He offers hope to British politics. Larry Fink, one of the world's most influential financiers, says Labour leader has shown, quote, real strength. But who else have we got in the mix? And let's have a look at David Lammy. Sky News here with the headline, Everything You Need to Know About the UK's new Foreign Secretary. But what they didn't say is what we can pop up on screen, which is a tweet here from David Lammy in August 2020. He says that cultural Marxism is going to rule this country. Nigel, that's Nigel Farage, you are a racist B and an insult to the history of this country. We're coming for you and we will, quote, we will beat you silly. There's no coming back. So we can be very sure that this very slick new Labour 2.0 is going to be very, very ruthless and dangerous in getting these policies through. And that probably brings us to Tony Blair, who is now, of course, the real queen, the power behind the Starmer throne. But here was a headline of some time ago. Rupert Murdoch donated $100,000 to the Tony Blair Faith charity, unaware his wife had allegedly grown close to the ex-PM. And in the text, which we won't read, it talks about that money and it talks about the Mr. Blair's relationship with Ms. Deng. So this is the real